I am going to kick it off by introducing our speakers. So I'm going to start with Trent. I'll give a little bio, and then Trent will tell you about power design before we turn it over, and I do the same with Jim. So Trent, thank you again for being here. Trent has more than 20 years in the construction industry and is a Fortune 500 leader with exceptional vision, strategy, and sales acumen, complemented by proven results in business transformation models. With a unique background in construction, electrical, mechanical, and information technology, he brings forward financial models that impact the bottom line. As the VP of Systems, Trent leads pursuit and pre-construction with building owners, developers, architects, engineers, and general contractors, while sharing the new way to deliver functionality across electrical, mechanical, IT, CRE, and LV systems. Prior to power design, Trent worked for Johnson Controls, and Trent serves as a member advisor on two prestigious industry boards, IBCon as part of Railcom, and SEAT, which is a Sports and Entertainment Alliance and Technology. He also volunteers with ACE, Cornet, and ABC. Most recently, Trent finished designing and building one of the smartest buildings in the world, CompuCom headquarters. Trent, why don't you give us a quick overview of your company, Power Design?
Absolutely. Thanks for having me, Kim, and appreciate the time today. Looking forward to having a chance to share some information, awesome information with everyone today. So Power Design, we are a multi-trade contractor. We are privately held. We have operations in approximately 42 states. And we really, we do partner very closely with Igor. We are more complementary on that respect. So we have a field arm that is second to none out there. We have approximately 6,000 men across and women across the field here in the US. And our claim to fame is really as an MSI, Master Systems Integrator. So really starting to understand the electrical and mechanical, the IT, the numerous systems in a facility, and really the art of how all of these languages kind of come together, A and B, really where the platform comes into play, which is where we're really excited to partner with Igor. So excited to share some more about Power Design, but certainly strength in size, 33-year-old business and growing, and headquartered out of St. Pete, Florida. So
great, thank you. We'll certainly learn more about Power Design, I'm sure, as we go through today. But from Igor's side, joining us, we have Jim Oldham, Senior Vice President of Sales at Igor. Jim is a seasoned business executive, trusted advisor, and sales professional with a proven track record over 25 years helping grow businesses via sales of high-value consulting, technology solutions, and managed services. He brings executive leadership experience in large enterprises, as well as in building 4 early-stage technology startups where he provided consulting, integration, and managed services across various technologies. Previous to Igor, Jim worked for 6 years at NTT Limited, previously Dimension Data, where for his first 5 years, he was responsible for the company's global modern collaboration go-to-market efforts, where he worked with 5 regions around the world, setting strategies, managing partnerships, including Cisco, Polycom, and Microsoft, enabling sales teams and driving strategic deals with key clients. Jim has worked extensively with clients in healthcare, pharmaceuticals, and financial services vertical markets. So Jim, why don't you give us a quick overview of Igor before kicking off our presentation?
Great, outstanding. Kim, thank you very much. I'm honored to be here with Kim, my colleague at Igor, and very honored to be with Trent, friend and partner at Power Design, and such a strategic partner with us. So first of all, just a little bit about Igor, a few key things. Igor is a smart building IoT platform solution. It's based on PoE, or Power over Ethernet, low voltage architecture. Our commitment to our clients is to enable a truly safe, healthy, sustainable, and manageable building environment for all their occupants of the buildings. It all started in Des Moines with Dwight Stewart, our founder, in 2013. Started focused on lighting and lighting controls. Now today we are a complete enterprise IoT platform provider and solution, and we're very excited and proud of that. Our mission is to become the preferred IoT backbone for low voltage management platform solutions for our clients new buildings. And so for Igor, our goal is to work through our partners and to deliver these solutions, for our clients globally today. So looking forward to the conversation today.
Wonderful. Well, with that, let's get started. A quick overview of the agenda. We've done our intros, and generally we're going to look at some of the smart building outlook, trends and predictions that other research orgs have shared, but then also what that means for this and the main key trends and where those are actually opportunities for the smart building industry. And of course, questions throughout are absolutely welcome. So Jim, if you'd like to kick us off, I will turn it over to you.
All right, outstanding. Well, listen, so the first thing we need to start with, obviously is to kind of frame the market a little bit. And again, the broadest sense of the discussion today is around smart building market solutions. And, according to Fortune Business Insights 2022, we see the smart building, or they're seeing the market, as of last year was just over 67 billion in total, and for 2022, this year we're going to be at just over 80 billion. For 2000 or going forward, the forecast is estimated to be just over 328 billion by 2029. That's a CAGR, or compounded annual growth rate, of about 22% annually. So again, exciting market. That's big. It includes a lot of things. We don't have a slide on this, but now you bring this down to a more specific technologies that we're talking about today with IoT, but then more specifically around PoE. Those numbers get a lot smaller, especially in the low voltage side, because the adoption is just on a major ramp right now. But in smart buildings, the PoE outlook for 2022 is just breaking the $1 billion mark for 2022 for PoE IoT solutions. And then, growing to by 2026, it's approximated to be 1.86 billion, and that's according to EMR Research 2022. And that's a CAGR of a little less than the overall smart building market, but around 13% on an annual basis. So with that, so we framed the market a little bit, but now what we want to do is talk about the desired outcomes of these clients that we see in the market. I mean, what is it we as providers, Trent and the Igors of the world, what are we trying to achieve and, in support of our clients? Now, this is an interesting chart here by Vorandex Global Corporate Smart Building Survey that they did in 2021. It shows the real estate executives. It shows their their number one priority only of over 300 enterprises that they interviewed. So this shows, cost you would expect. So I would expect cost to be, in past reports, I don't know what they've done, but I would expect that to be very high. It's still number one, but it's only 30% of what they're trying to achieve within their building environment and management environment of those buildings. Then you get to, number two, improving the health and well-being of these buildings. I mean, that's music to all of us right now. So how do we help them do that? And so that's some of the things we're going to be talking about in these trends and opportunities. And then decarbonization of the building portfolio is 22% of those respondents. That's their number one goal. That's really trending to a much higher number than it has over the past. And we'll talk about why that is. And then improving the resiliency of the buildings. Again, that covers a lot of things, including security, physical and cyber. And then attracting and retaining talent. 9%, their number one reason and the number one priority in the building and real estate management is to attract and retain. So again, just really interesting outcomes, and to think that these are all number one rated of those enterprises. And it's not, it's not just these are the top 5 things. These are number one for that many of the respondents. So really, really interesting insights there. Kim? So what Trent and I are going to cover, I'm going to start us out, and then Trent will lead us as I'll transition here about halfway through, are the key trends, that we believe. Again, we picked 5. There's a lot, and we'll maybe discuss some of those other ones that aren't on here today, and we welcome that. But the workforce environment, the climate change, the energy consumption, cyber, and then a little bit about the advancements in IoT and PoE.
And Jim, I'll have some fun with this as you're speaking here. But for anyone that may be out there from Cisco, hopefully you recognize the background on my screen. That's of the Toronto office where Cisco was able to launch some PoE lighting. So just wanted to give a shout out for any of our fans out there from Cisco that may have joined. But I always like to give some color to context if anyone was wondering. So
awesome. See, I should be in the New York Penn one. I should be in the New York 1 Penn office right now. So, and then we'd really have it covered.
What I love is that there are now multiple places that have put cool designs and smart building technology incorporated. And of course, Cisco seems to be leading, but this picture here, we won't necessarily say, this is one of our clients, but there are now increasingly places where this is the expectation. And I think it relates to this topic right here as to why so many leading companies that have maybe a little budget that are really going all in on smart tech and good design. So Jim, did you want to share a little bit about this before we have a little more conversation?
Yeah, I mean, listen, to frame this and again, to leave it open, we all know, the last couple of years has just totally turned the world upside down for us. And all of our clients, everyone you talk to, and it's interesting because you got bankers out there saying, hey, let's get everybody back to work. We want everybody back in the office, got to be back in the office. Then you got other, whether it's the Googles or whatever, okay, 30% of our workforce is now going to work at home. So that dynamic again, goes back to, what the owners of the real estate are trying to achieve, and then how can we help them, figure out, what not only, what is the right model, but give them more data so that they can inform those decisions going forward. And then, as we all know, and again, we worked with Cisco on this a lot as well, the working from home, that extension of that core of your office is now the home. And then how much of that, and then most importantly, as far as one of the key things we talk to clients about is what's going to happen next. So we create this environment there. Yeah, we got to figure out what we're doing today, but then what about, next year, next 10 years, what is going to happen? How do I make sure my building is prepared for these things? So, and speaking about the IoT platforms that have to marry, when you talk about the opportunities for us to help our clients, it's marrying the IT with the OT. It's, how do you control the environments? How do you assist with that data and transition or transparency, if you would, to the data, and then provide that back in a way that'll inform how they design, how they enable their buildings, how do they provide better services to their clients, how do they keep them safe, how do they make sure that if there's all the environments are clean and disinfected, how do they know where people are actually, how they're using those buildings. So again, the one Penn 1 example with Cisco really is an impressive environment that we worked with them very closely with with that whole team, and it's really an impressive environment that shows this in action, and it ties to their DNA spaces, where all the data that's collected comes into this one environment and provides you that transparency.
If I might add some couple things on this. So some of the trends, if you recall, pre-pandemic, all about densification, right? Especially inside Class A office spaces. Post-pandemic has been about, hey, let's understand six feet of separation. Let's understand kind of what that looks like inside conference rooms, et cetera. So I think that's important to call out, and understanding the types of technologies that are now coming about. There's a lot of different startups out there that are now we're starting to leverage pieces and parts of wireless access points now to help us understand and how that correlates back to mobile devices, and understand where a worker type is within a space. And I call it the smart space side of things versus the smart building side of things, and really the intelligence behind all of that. Right. So that's one. I think the other thing you called out, which is interesting, is the home being an extension of the office. And this is where there's another collision taking place, and candidly, where there is a completely different offering on the residential side with OEMs versus the commercial side with right. Class. You have different product types. You have different manufacturers, and this is an interesting space. And in my opinion, where that collision is really interesting to watch unfold. You've got a lot of developers now in the multifamily apartment, condo, MDU space, if you will, starting to have these types of conversations. And again, Class A, different, different types of product sets, and I think it all comes down to architecture. A, B, understanding the languages that these systems are speaking. And C, of course, the APIs, and understanding how that all plays in, to the network, the quote unquote network. Because now, within that residential space, you have the ISP coming into play, whereas that might not be. That's certainly a factor in the commercial space, but it's, again, in the residential MDU space, you start to see the ISP having a little more weight, because they're able to offer these bundles now, and it's interesting to watch. So I guess my challenge to anyone out there is, while we're watching this home become an extension of the office, is be mindful of that. Architecture is a big one. You hear Igor talk about platforms. That is huge. If we can find a platform for the 30 to 60 different systems that are going inside of a space, ultimately you win and the client wins. So that's specifically where Jim was talking about the opportunities of IT and OT coming into play there. So be mindful of that. There's not a one size fits all approach here. And again, I always go back to the languages piece of it. If you can understand how System A is talking German versus System B talking Japanese, and you can find a translator, that you need to be mindful of that and ensure we can translate all of that. So,
and I'm just going to add, as a marketer, that I think one of the big reasons that one of the answers that were the top 5 or top priorities was about attaining, recruiting and attracting talent. The purpose of buildings now for a lot of these, specifically Class A customers, is to be an extension of a brand as well, and to provide a compelling reason to leave your house. Why would you leave your house and have the expense of a commute if you're going to go to an office, sit in a cubicle, and have bad lighting and just sit on Teams calls all day? So instead, be really tactical and planning the return to work if that's what the company is doing, and then giving a space where it feels good to be there. And the people working in the office might not know all of this complexity that's behind the scenes, because in the end, it has to work seamlessly and it has to be a good experience. So I'm very much in line. And I think that this is clearly the #1 driver, I believe, for, when we talk retail, office, commercial space, absolutely driving that shift. Another big one is certainly climate change. So, Jim, give us a little insight into of what this is all about.
Again, I like starting this with the race to net zero, with climate change and regulatory, and Trent and I've talked a lot about this, about 36% of carbon emissions come from our buildings. I mean, that's just massive. So there's more regulations, coming down, driving things, and there's a lot of companies that are just taking massive initiatives. So the government has their objectives for over the next 10 years and through 2050. California has set some very aggressive goals between now and 2030. New York City has set their regulations for New York, and for those buildings, they're cranking them down in a phased approach, but again, very aggressively between now and 2030 and 2050. And then on top of that, we have clients. One of our large pharmaceutical clients is investing, tens, if not hundreds of billions of dollars over the next 10 years with their objective to be carbon neutral by 2030 for their entire company, one of the largest pharmaceuticals in the world. So again, all these things, are driving, this huge need and this vacuum for technology solutions like ours and for service providers like many of us. And this opportunity is really, really driving this out. And again, the more we can, demonstrate the resiliency, the transparency, the ease of use, and that convergence between the IT and OT technologies, because again, that is something, as Trent was pointing out, the collision of that is pretty significant. And again, Bob Cicero, Cisco, we've spent a lot of time, talking about that management of these environments now. It's just a huge challenge. You have your IT over here collecting data, churning, all types of applications, and then you have your OT teams over here. They're like, what do I need software for? So anyway, so that's a challenge from every aspect of building technology, of building the buildings, and that's something we can help our clients, I think, evolve over time.
Yeah, I don't think there's a specific product that is the trick here. I think what this is, Jim and I sit on different councils, and one of the ones, we had both attended a leadership forum with the World Green Building Council. I think it's all about understanding the type of leadership action that you can take to have an impact on this piece of the sector, if you will, right, for the race to net zero. Understanding how the difference of what a clean energy solution might look like for your building, potentially having clean energy for a generator instead of a generator, right? What does that look like? There's new things out there called mega packs that Tesla has that they're offering. I mean, City of San Francisco is looking at backing up the entire city with clean energy and Tesla mega packs. It's amazing. What does that look like, in return with your building in that space, instead of having your diesel fuel in your generator? So I think it's all about the small wins here. Conversely, Jim's point, what does that look like related to carbon emissions? How are you measuring that? What devices can you use to measure that? We're all aware of what sub-meters are. Are we part of that process? Are we part of those discussions? If we're part of them, then the next segment down becomes, if you're talking clean energy, you're talking sub-metering of your utilities and understanding how to reduce that footprint. Now comes into play that resource consumption element, right? Once you start playing into all those factors and the resource consumptions that are available with this. So I think it's being mindful. It's being able to be a part of those discussions. It's no longer about the IT or the OT side. It's more of the business side of things now. And again, being at the table and having part of those discussions. There's no secret that I think that where the World Green Building Council is at, they're suggesting that things are expected to be the carbon footprint is expected to double by I think it was either 2050 or 2060. Don't quote me on that year there. But again, how do you make a small dent? A, and B, how do you start getting at the table to advise your clients on the small base hit wins, right? Because that'll ultimately impact how climate change, if you will. So.
Well, certainly sounds like you can either be forced into caring about it, or you can lead and lean into caring about it in terms of the regulations are coming. And it might be a trickle effect, but if you've got multiple locations, multiple states for your buildings, it really is better, not just from being ahead of the regulations, but also, again, the brand. A lot of employees, especially some of the younger generations, care a lot about the sustainability. So you can not only be ahead of regulations by adopting technology that can help you achieve or get closer to a net zero or a greener profile, but you can also have the added brand benefit of being a leader too, which may help with recruitment and partner relationships and everything. So I think this leans really nicely into the next conversation here where, you know, green and sustainability is often complementary to goals regarding reducing energy consumption and reducing operational costs of the building. So I think Trent, I'll let you kick this one off.
Yep, Jim, were you going to say something?
No, I was just going to say, yeah, you take it from here.
Okay. Yeah, so this is interesting. I think it's no secret that there's growing energy consumption concerns, you know, specifically, you know, obviously globally, but specifically here in the US. And so, you know, when we look at, you know, some of the trends, buildings are utilizing, you know, approximately 50% of water and energy. You know, what other trends do we continue to see? There's no secret. The grid is overaged. And you know, we continue to see themes there, which is these are areas of opportunity for some of the startups that we're starting to see on the market, you know, out in Palo Alto. There's even more demands for clean energy solutions. We mentioned a few of those earlier, now more than ever. And again, that plays back into your climate change, you know, item from this slide before. So, you know, as we start to look at that and we start to understand, you know, all of these elements, the question becomes, how do we start being mindful of it and understanding, you know, the opportunities and what they look like today. You know, there was, you know, we mentioned the carbon footprint earlier. We mentioned the high consumption and potentially quote unquote waste that comes, that increases as the overall cost of operations and maintenance increase for a building. So, you know, how do we start to measure the energy that's consumed? There's a lot of products out there today that show some of that. We talked about sub-meters earlier a minute ago. How do we start to implement some advanced technologies, artificial intelligence, IoT, PoE, and other? I mean, candidly, we're in discussions right now where we are reviewing AC versus DC solutions for in the building. You know, what does that look like as we're starting to talk about building architecture? How do we start building and implementing systems that we mentioned earlier about and centering around the theme of clean energy? What does that look like? I think the most important takeaway from this is there's no doubt the grids is again, it's overaged. We are consuming, you know, buildings are the utilities, right? Gas, water, electric. We talk about the fourth utility of the internet. You know, the consumption and the percentages of consumptions of these utilities are significantly increasing. You know, how do we, again, be at the table having these discussions and then offering up solutions that potentially could impact reduced energy usage? And one of the things that we've talked about quite a bit is if you're able to start weaving in IoT, PoE, again, a little broad in nature, we can get specific. Are we able with some form of, with converged control systems to reduce energy usage, you know, 20, 30%, and then maintenance costs, you know, 10, 20, 30%. If we can start doing that and being a seat at the table to drive those conversations, I think at the end of the day, you know, every building gets a little smarter, a little bit more intelligent, A and B, you start to gain these wins that the overall impact within the US, not just on the Class A side, but also on the multifamily MDU side, we all start to win. And Jim, I know you and I have had some spirited discussions on this over the last several months. You know, I'm not sure if you want to weigh in.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And to me, one of the most exciting things we're seeing here in discussions with clients and some of our most strategic partners that may be on here right now is really around the generation of and storage of and reuse of clean energy. So the true DC microgrid, if you would, you know, environments, you know, for a building, for a campus, you know, and eventually for, you know, larger communities, whatever. But you know, creating those things and the idea. So the Sinclair Hotel, for example, down in Dallas Fort Worth, you know, it was an early generation of that we had the opportunity to work with them on, you know, where they've got basically a bunch of Tesla batteries in the basement there instead of a you know, oil generated or you know, any carbon creation going on, you know, in their basement. And it's really significant where, you know, they're generating solar energy, you know, through panels on top of the hotel, and then driving that down into so that they can actually run, you know, for hours, the entire facility. So that DC microgrid, and again, there's a lot of energy and work going on around that right now. And just hearing that and thinking we're working with some partners on some really cool things around that, that's gonna change, and that's actually gonna drive a whole new, you see all these predictions of market size and all that for IoT, PoE. I mean, it's gonna change everything. And that's the exciting part to me. And it'll be interesting if some other folks get into that conversation with us here about that and what they see in their environments.
So you said Tesla battery. I see dollar signs. One of the most common objections to this sort of, especially we come from a PoE based mindset because that's what Igor's backbone is. It provides a lot of benefits from a structured, reliable, scalable point of view, but there's hesitation when you have someone in the room who says, "Oh, but will this be more expensive to install? Is this going to be more expensive from an operational point of view? What's the ROI?" You're talking Tesla batteries, and a CFO might put up a bit of a fight because they're concerned about how it hits their bottom line. So with this tension, I think it's not uncommon to say that at a company, you're going to have people who are fully embracing this, who want this, who can see the value, who love the sustainability element, the well-building element. How do they talk about the ROI? Or, could you guys expand on that? Because a few questions were about specifically cost ROI, specifically around PoE systems.
Yeah, I'll take a crack, Jim. Feel free to add color.
Sure.
I think you got to look at this in totality. It's not just about your first cost. I mean, so for anyone who understands the Tesla piece of it, their government is offering up upwards of 27% tax credits, depending on what your clean energy solution looks like. So when you're looking at the total ROI, you really need to look at it, to your point, as a CFO would, not just, hey, this first cost, if you will. So I think that's first and foremost. Secondarily, there's several aspects of how that clean energy could work, and this is potentially where solar starts coming into play. And what does that do again with your backup? And again, you might be looking at first cost dollar signs, but there are programs where you could get grants. There's programs. I mean, there's a lot of elements at play here. So I don't think there's a one size fits all answer to this, and it's certainly not a first cost discussion. It is about the operational side, A, and B, about the tax credits that you would receive for going this route. And there are tons of programs out there. My challenge to those that are interested in having this is get familiar with a seasoned partner that can help dive into the weeds for you and guide you through those discussions. And again, it's every building, every space has different numbers. It's not just, there's no blanket way to answer that question with a percentage, if you will. So Jim, I don't know if you want to feed off of that.
Yeah, no, I mean, listen, what you're going to get back out of this from an ROI is very much driven by commercial versus residential, new construction versus renovation or tenant improvements. Each model or each project is going to have its own ROI, right? And I think building that model or helping clients build that model is a really important aspect of this. Again, I keep going back to it, but again, it's been, been so close and been watching it so closely and being a part of it at Penn 1 with Cisco. It's just a phenomenal thing that they've done, breaking it down from the construction, all the build costs, and now going into the operational phase and all the ongoing cost savings and costs that can be achieved. So, the breakdown of this is really important, that our clients understand where the true savings are, and that it's very, that front end is nice, but it's really how do you attain those goals, not just cost savings and energy savings, but how do you create these other outcomes and take all those in consideration in your ROI.
I think that is a really good thing to consider, is that ROI can be built in a lot of different ways. So it depends on the use case, how you're constructing it. But I think generally, at least from Igor's perspective, I've written a lot of case studies installation costs are typically very comparable. If you're actually comparing apples to apples, if you're comparing just line voltage lighting to a whole PoE IoT network, you're probably going to think that the PoE IoT full smart building package will look more expensive because it includes much more than just lighting. So that can be a quick tip from my experience, making sure you have actually you're comparing the same systems and what it is to unify them under one network versus having them all separately. I think that leads nicely into this next topic. I'll also let Trent kick it off, but there's certainly a concern about cybersecurity, especially in our geopolitical world today. And cybersecurity problems can be very expensive. So when the definition of IoT is Internet of Things, how do you protect that internet and the things on the internet? So I'll turn it over to you to discuss this trend.
Yeah, this is definitely top of mind for everyone we're speaking with, right? There's not one size fits all answer here. So, look, at the end of the day, there's a lot of different opinions out there. I think one of the ones that Jim and I, reviewed, and candidly, we think it's higher than this, but Kaspersky's had stated that 4 out of 10 connected buildings are at risk of cyber attack. We talk about, there's a lot of organizations, very, very good organizations out there that are focused on this. For those of you that know HVAC controls, that world is still coming up to speed maturity wise around the security side of things, right? No longer are you able to just have password on your devices because that's easy for any hack to get into. So I think at the end of the day, exposing that and having that be top of mind, and again, talking about cyber posture is really what this comes down to. And this is, again, you start seeing that collision of some of that of the IT kind of coming in and shoring up the intelligence on the facility side, if you will. So let's kind of ground ourselves on posture for a second, because I think that's a big piece of this, and that plays into the cybersecurity threat piece. So when we talk about posture, we're referring overall to their cybersecurity strength and how well your network can predict or prevent or respond to some form of ever-changing threat. It's no longer for the novices out there about the Trend Micro on your laptop, where these are signature-based algorithms that are aware of what these signatures look like. I think a lot of this comes down to making sure that you get with your you understand the elements of that posture, from penetration testing to security awareness to understanding any types of vulnerability management to training for your employees. And from there, understanding that this is something that isn't static. This is something that's ever changing, and that we're able to understand that there's new vulnerabilities and threats coming every day within that cyber landscape. And so, as we start to transition from historical fragmented tools to understand and to understand that there's now an end-to-end way of looking at posture that can protect against these new threats and vulnerabilities, I think that's where we're starting to see a change in how you're looking at building systems and IT systems. And again, we keep using this word collision, but that's where it's coming together on the network, if you will. And so, I think, being mindful of that, implementing more operational contingency plans. And I think, honestly, a lot of this comes down to just basic education and training for our employees, and simple things that we're all aware of. But there are organizations out there that teach you, hey, be careful to open up this email and things like that. So, I'm gonna pause there. I said a lot in the first minute and a half that potentially could get confusing, and some folks might not understand what pen testing is. So I'm sensitive to that and respectful, and want to make sure, Jim, you have a chance to speak, and of course, Kim, yourself as well. But I want to make sure that when we look at this, we think this is definitely, in addition to your hybrid work, this is definitely a top item. Again, we're looking at all control systems, HVAC, elevator, lighting. We're looking at any avenue someone could potentially take to get into that system from the outside, A, and B, what does your cyber fortress look like? How well protected are you? People always joke, there are a lot of cyber experts we speak with and joke around. They say, hey, Trent, if I wanted to get into your house, I'm going to get into your house no matter the cost you spend. And that's fair. And that's one way of looking at it. The challenge back is, look, if we don't invest and continue to understand the different types of protocols and architectures that are out there to build this fortress, and we're not ahead of that, it's gonna enable the outsiders to get in quicker and do more damage. So Jim, I'll turn it to you.
No, listen, I mean, everything you said actually made sense to me, but that might just be me. And I've spoken to you so much about this already. But I think one of the key things here is to consider all these new platforms that are out there. Igor being one of many, right, of various ilks and, high voltage, low voltage, et cetera, is making sure that they are secure. Because again, there's so many, that a lot of people are building technology out there. And that's one of the things we pride ourselves on, is that focus on security and that we put into this. That's one of the most foundational things. And again, that integration when you're going to the HVAC systems and these other systems, that integration really can expose a lot of things, like you're saying, Trent. So this really goes to the foundation of selecting the technologies that you want to enable the behaviors and the outcomes you want to create. So, and the training, I can't overemphasize that with you. I mean, I think that is going to be foundational for those that don't understand these new environments, or one side or the other. Listen, I'm from the IT world. Trent, you're from the OT world, right? More. So, it's an interesting, thing. I learn a lot, and I try to educate myself to understand, as we're doing these things, more and more about the side things I don't understand. So anyway, I think you said most of it already.
I think to add, just because I don't want to beat a dead horse, but it's important. I mean, companies that require employees, vendors, customers to use two-factor authentication, multi-factor, or at least cycling through complex passwords. I think that's another element. I'm just kind of pointing out specifics to demonstrate that that we're thinking about this. Firewalls are certainly a big one, but there's other antivirus and other anti-malware tools that are part of strong security postures that can help deter cyber attacks. I think that's important. Anti-phishing. I used the example of the email before. I think it's important to keep that top of mind, and potentially even scanning messages and removing any malicious content before forwarding them through a company's mail server. There's so much here. I mean, I can spend literally 2 hours on this topic alone. So my challenge to the team is understand for the IT folks, it's a lot more than just firewalls, right? There's a posture side of this, and for the OT guys, it's challenging your vendors and asking them, because there's a lot of contractors out there that do HVAC controls, but how mindful are they of the cyber aspect of things? And especially as we're looking to take when we look at risers going into buildings, we'll talk about in our next slide, and the amount of services coming into the buildings, and the fact that, look, it's no secret. I mean, for those that know me, I always try to take away from the multitude of networks and try to collapse into a single network. I think there's a lot of pros and there's an art in doing that. But again, do you expose yourself? And these are spirited debates that you can get into when you start building out your space in your building. But I think it's all about the framework. It's all about performing risk assessments. I think it's about prioritizing and understanding what risk is to their company, understanding that there's automated tools out there on the cyber side. And then it's a lot of education and administrative costs, and then understanding what privileges look like. So again, can spend a lot of time on this, but a lot of detail here, and we'll pause there.
I'm just going to add a little bit of color as well, because something you can consider is what the centralizing platform that you select should have market-leading cybersecurity protections. That has to be a non-negotiable, because that essentially can act as a firewall. So all systems connected to it fall under that umbrella of protection. So you want the highest level of protection possible. And we actually have some resources on that. I can include that meaning in the follow-up email for this. But on some cybersecurity terms and identifiers, so that you pick a platform that you're going to manage your whole building with. Well, that platform better be market leading. It better be enterprise level protection that Fortune 50 companies are comfortable using, because it doesn't matter how big or small you are, cybersecurity will come for everybody. So you might as well try and protect yourself in the same way all these big companies would try to protect themselves. And we've already started hinting a little bit, so I will flip the slide just to kind of keep the conversation going. But I didn't mean to interrupt you there, Trent.
I was to say the only comment I'll make is, again, I'll go back because of the whole what we talked about earlier, that hybrid workplace and being mindful that we have workers that are in apartments and apartment complexes versus MDUs. You don't have to spend Fortune $50 on cybersecurity inside of an apartment building. So I want to be mindful of that for any developers that may be on the phone. There are creative ways, low cost, high return solutions on the cyber side that you can protect your asset. And again, I think it's just being mindful of what posture looks like for your building and being able to drive home a solution. It's all about risk mitigation and understanding the value of risk and calling that out up front with some form of integrator, partner, or cyber team that can help get you there. So that's the only comment I'll make on that front. Well, it looks like
you want to kick this off, this topic?
You already transitioned. My apologies. I was all excited. So advancements in IoT on PoE. This is a fun one. You've heard a lot of different examples today. Jim and I will have some fun with this, but I think Jim and I were a little. I think we were floored when we found out in the last year that there were over 67% of firms that either had or were evaluating and planning for some form of IoT platform. I think that was pretty cool for us to understand. I think Jim kind of said, "Hey, dude, I've known about this for 3 years," but that's a separate story. We were having drinks when we were discussing this, but this is interesting. Knowing that, and we keep talking about a platform. I think when I look at it, there's a lot of different pieces of head-end equipment out there. There's a lot of different strategies, and clients are looking for fewer systems to manage. They're looking for some form of centralized platform. And what does that mean? I mean, there's a lot, Schneider has their way, Siemens has their way, Honeywell has their way of looking at things. So, what platform is there that's best suited for your type of building, right? Your vertical, A, B, what type of experience, whether it be employee or whether it be residential, does it make sense? And what type of business case is there? And specific to speaking about outcomes, what does that look like for that specific space? And then understanding the different, IoT, sensors, actuators. There's all these different elements in IoT, and of course the PoE side of things. Platforms are expanding. What type of integrations potentially will you look at in the future? There's no doubt that PoE is playing a big role in that net zero building and that. And again, I go back to, how smart does your building need to be? Is it a smart element? Is it a smart building? Is it a smart space? What does that look like? What's the highest priority use case? I mean, I've got a use case catalog of over 300 use cases, and I sit down and I'll go through these with developers, architects. Guys, we go, sometimes we pick 8, maybe 9, maybe we start with 5, right? But there's so many out there, and we try to zero in to really focus on the most yielding outcomes, right? Because that helps control cost. And then understanding the types of partners that can help guide you there to somewhat future-proof you. A lot of value in all the different OEMs we mentioned out there, but it's not a one-size-fits-all approach. And I think, just to call out Igor a little bit, I mean, they've developed an amazing platform that can kind of hone it all in, and they have a lot of these APIs developed. Sorry, I've got to give Igor a little credit here. I mean, this is their core business, but at the end of the day, their platform plays into others as well. So I think it's all about the flexibility and understanding platforms that have been battle tested. And I'll pause there because Jim, I'm sure I'll play off you here a little bit. So I'll give the ball to you.
No, listen, I mean, and thanks for the call outs, but listen, the technology here is evolving so quickly, and the conversations with clients, I mean, they get so big-eyed, right? I mean, you do these presentations and you tell them, oh, we have APIs, we're agnostic, we can integrate with this, with that. And those are nice conversations. But what you have to the point here is, with this evolution happening so quickly, with the importance of security, with the importance of this needing to be resilient, you do all this development, and guess what? Software is going to break. it's going to have issues. So what the challenge of what we've learned with our clients is, yeah, we can talk about all these things, but then let's bring it back. Let's really talk about, again, what is the profile, what are the outcomes? What is it, is air quality, circadian rhythm? What are the things that are going to change and affect the environment that make it better for, safer, a more wellness focused environment for your users? So that, again, it goes back to the question, how smart does your building need to be? Collecting data just for collecting data, you can drown, yourself in data. That's, I love the DNA spaces is just a wonderful example of a thoughtful way to capture all this information and present it back to those that need it in the different disciplines, whether you're managing the facilities or whether you're controlling a meeting room, or whether you're you're running a conference, in a certain space. And so, it's really, to me, this is about understanding your use case, selecting enough technology, not too much. The beauty of what we try to do on our platform is to make it extensible so that you can start out with one thing and then expand it over time. So, I mean, again, find the high value, focus on that, because again, there's just too much out there, and it's evolving quickly. But some clients, they love to be the first ones, but it's most want to have something that works day one, and so you really need to guide them. So I think that's the real opportunity here for our clients is making sure they know what they need and want.
Add some color, Jim, to the platform side of things. I think, when you start looking at a network or networks, it can get a little in the weeds there. So, for the property managers on the webinar, I mean, you have computer maintenance management systems. You've got, for the network folks, you've got your network management system. You've got your LAN, you've got your WAN, you've got, for the property side of things, you've got your property management system, you've got your BAS, you've got your low voltage systems, you've got your middleware devices, you've got all of your analytics, you've got your connectivity to the outside world, there's a lot here, right? And again, the OT side, the IT side, does it make sense to collapse them? Maybe, might not. But if it does, and you're starting to explore this and it becomes all about big data and you're leveraging that, the question becomes, what platform do you explore, and how do you start aggregating the data to do something with it? And I think we're weaving now into the technology solutions piece, but this is where you start talking about you start reviewing this disparity of those disparate systems against the platform, and you make your evaluation. So I cannot tell you enough how oftentimes we see a lot of master systems integrators forgetting about, we forgot that there was a CMMS system or a property management system or a BAS system, and we're only talking about AV and IT and our routers and our switches and our phone systems and our wireless. And I'm like, what about the rest of the building? So and that may or may not be in scope, but it's important to call out. So, when we look at this, I always start with, when we talk about tech, let's keep this very simple. Let's keep this fundamental. Let's look at your risers in that building. Forget a hospital for a second, if we will, and forget banks. But let's talk about, why do we have to have a separate riser for security, a separate riser for AV, a separate riser for the ISP? Let's talk about basic. Are there ways to collapse them and get together? I think, we start talking about technology solutions, that's part of it. So, we can debate whether or not that makes sense depending on the use case, if you will. But and Jim, I'll turn it to you. I know there's this is a good one, keys to mutual success, but I'll turn it to you for
well, let me just ask Kim, are there any questions that we should address?
We are at time. I think we've been, I've been sort of weaving in a little bit to drive the conversation, to address some of the pre-submitted questions. But I actually think it's time for us to do our final question. And I enjoy sort of taking over, and I'm gonna be honest, I'm hosting, it's my final question. So I'd love to know if, after all of this, and I'm going to leave the keys to mutual success up there. I think you touched on it. I think it's good just to reiterate, and everyone will get a recording of this so they can see this as well. but what is, if you were to give a big, bold prediction, and I don't want it just to be, oh, hybrid is going to continue for work. I want you to think about kind of what's the future hold? If you had a glass orb and you were predicting the future, what's something that you think might be surprising or bold or any sort of big predictions? Maybe I'll turn it over to Jim first. What's your boldest prediction?
Well, if you ask that question, my boldest prediction is the New York Giants are going to win Super Bowl 56. So that's
okay.
That's as far out there as I can get. And anyway, no, listen, relative to this, to me, the DC microgrid, the clean energy generation and storage, I think by the end of 23, we're going to see, some real impact of that in everyone's view of what can happen in affecting our carbon footprints and affecting how we manage our environments. And I just think by the end of 23, we're going to see that change a lot of analysts' views on what the future holds. And I'm really excited about that and working with some of our strategic partners on that at Igor. Trent, what do you got?
Yeah.
Be bold, man, be bold.
Well, for anyone that knows me, I'm a huge PoE lighting fan. So, it's interesting when you start looking at, what Bixie's doing and the amount of electricians that are funneling through Bixie for training around this. I've always thought that PoE lighting is or that digital ceiling play is going to get hotter and hotter and hotter. And I think in the next 5 years, I think I'm careful to put a percentage on this, Kim, but I do think it's going to continue to grow and thrive. So I'm not sure if that's so bold. Maybe bold is saying 100% of all buildings will be PoE lighting. I highly doubt that, but the trend will continue to increase. And candidly, this wasn't discussed, but I do think there's an element of 5G that's going to come into play with a lot of the IoT side of things, and that's something we didn't talk about today, but I did not want to not at least reference. I think 5G is huge as solutions start to come online, and I think there's still a little bit of confusion, and I think there's still a lot of markets that are underserved from a 5G perspective at the moment. But I do think 5G will start weaving into becoming a big factor here over the next 2 to 3 years. So I don't want to ignore that.
Wonderful. Well, thank you both for your time, and I appreciate everyone who's attended today. That is it from our webinar, and we will be in touch with a copy of the recording. Please do reach out to Jim or Trent if you had any questions that weren't answered. And we appreciate you joining us today. Thank you so much, and thank you, Jim, and thank you, Trent.
Thank you, Kim, and thank you, everyone.
Right.
Thanks,
Thank you,
Trent.
All right,
Always
care.
a pleasure, my friend.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thanks, Jim.